So tonight's talk is like most of the talks recently about the question or the challenge of the week, because I can't think of 52 things to talk about every year. So when we've got it, I use it. This is a good one. The question of the week is, who can I learn from today? So who can I learn from today? It could also be read as like, who can I learn from now? And this is such an important question to ask as often as we can, because we end up putting people into these neat little boxes in our life. It's like, this person serves this purpose, and this person serves this purpose, and this person over here. And we like to keep everybody neat and tidy in their little places because it's just easier, it's less complicated. If we don't have to think like, maybe I should actually, respect this person today and listen to what they have to say. It's just a lot easier if we can just write people off and ignore them, right? That is a really easy way to stay exactly the way that you are now. And this is really like one of the evolutionary benefits of it, I guess, is we know what we've done so far has worked to keep us alive, so we don't want to, do anything to really rock the boat too much and throw ourselves off. But learning is very important, more important from an evolutionary standpoint, I think. The idea that I can learn from any situation or anybody at any time is so powerful and so useful, and really changes our entire experience of life and relationships and people, of course. So the first thing that I thought of with this story was the idea of, with this question rather, was the story about emptying your cup. And there's a version of this in Zen Flesh, Zen Bones, which we have at the dojo. If you haven't read this, it's one of my favorite books. I quote this and talk about it more than I think any other book. It is actually the first story in this. And there's a reason it's the first story. I'm not actually going to read this one because they just do a real short version. I'm just going to say my dramatized version. But this is many years ago. A college university professor, not just a college professor, but a college university professor, goes to see a Zen master, and he wants to learn Zen. He says, "Sir, I'd like for you to teach me about Zen Buddhism. This is what I know already." And he launches into his whole explanation of all of the stuff that he knows. This is who started Zen, and this is the lineage of, where we are today, and there's this school of Zen and that school of Zen, and da-da-da-da-da. And he's talking, and the Zen master is nodding politely, and he goes and gets a tea kettle, and he starts pouring a cup of tea. And the professor keeps talking, and the Zen master keeps nodding and pouring, and the professor's talking and he's pouring until the tea cup starts overflowing with tea. And the professor says, "Stop! The cup is overfull. It cannot take any more." And the Zen master smiles, and he puts down the tea kettle, and he says, "Yes, and you are like this teacup. You are so full of it that there's no room for anything else." And this is where the phrase "empty your cup" comes from, and this is one that you'll hear me say from time to time, but you'll hear it. It's part of the popular nomenclature now, I guess. It is such an important thing to be able to do in martial arts and meditation, in anywhere in life, because it is all about opening ourselves up for the possibility to learn and get better. And I see this all the time, and I have experienced it, very often in my own practice, where I am in a class and a teacher is talking about a technique. And this would happen when I was practicing with Sifu Brown. This happens when I'm practicing with Hadra Machado, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And they start explaining a technique. And this is a technique that I've done for years. This is a technique that I'm pretty decent at, but as soon as I have the idea in my head, I know this technique, then I stop listening and I stop learning and I stop getting, the possibility of new details. And this is hugely detrimental to our ability to improve, because we surely do have a decent kind of reservoir of details and an understanding of what goes into a technique. But there is always a possibility of learning something new. When you hear something in a slightly different way, it could click for the first time in a way that actually completely transforms your technique. And what we need to do then is actively go into class, or at the beginning of every new technique, actively empty our cup. And we come into class and we've got a full cup. We've got all of this, all of this baggage, all of this, knowledge and understanding, what we think we know about this thing. And we need to toss that out right away and set down that empty cup and say, I'm ready. Start pouring, please, sir. I'm ready for whatever there is. And this is kind of both an active pursuit where, I'm actively emptying out the cup, but I'm also actively looking for, what can I learn today? Where is this breakthrough going to come today for me? And I'm actively pursuing, kind of looking for new people to learn from. So another book that I love to talk about sometimes is Way of the Peaceful Warrior. And Way of the Peaceful Warrior is actually the book that I read. It was gifted to me by my good friend Michael, who convinced me to practice martial arts. And this book was really the thing that put me over the edge, because it is a great kind of introduction to philosophy and the student-teacher relationship and learning and all of these wonderful themes. And if you watch the movie, read the book, it's better. The hero of the story, Dan, who's also the author, he named his character after himself. He is walking around late one night, kind of restless, and just has this sense of like, there's something missing in life. There's something that I'm not quite getting. And so he's walking around and he ends up at this gas station. And he ends up in a conversation with the gas station attendant who ends up being named Socrates. And Socrates is a strange name for a gas station attendant. But he ends up being just this incredible teacher that totally changes Dan's life. And I think at the end of that first interaction, actually, Dan starts to walk away, and then he looks back for a second, and Socrates has gone from being on the ground to standing on the roof of the gas station. And this is kind of a throwback to like old martial arts movies, and this is something that they say like, you take your eye off a ninja for a second, and then they're way up high, and it's like, how do they even get up there? It's not always going to be that obvious that there's something kind of special and interesting to really be present for, to learn from this person. So we want to be looking for and really curious and ready to discover from anybody. And you might find this person in a gas station, you might find this person in class. A senior student's experience in class is often one of, when you're working with a junior student, it goes like this. You hear the technique, you see the technique that we're doing, and then you get over there with your partner and then you start talking. And you're wagging your jaw, and it's like, here's all the stuff that I know about this technique, and here are all these details. And that is a lazy senior student. That is a lazy teacher who just tells you everything they know. They open up their mouth and it's just diarrhea coming out. It's like, you've got to be careful and kind of discerning with what you give this person so that it doesn't just become overwhelming. And this all hinges on your ability to be over there with that person and see and really feel and understand what they need in this moment. And in that process, there's always the possibility of, I can learn from this person. I can learn from this junior student. And oftentimes, if I'm teaching class, I'm not looking at the way you guys are throwing techniques and seeing like, hey, that's a way better front kick than mine. I'm going to change my front kick so it looks like yours. That doesn't happen very often. But I'll see lots of ways to not throw a technique. I'll see things that I need to obviously do a better job of explaining, communicate in a way so that it gets across to everybody in a new way. And then every once in a while, I will see something that I will call, at worst, like an interesting interpretation of a technique, or at best, something that actually this is something that I have not really considered before, and that that doesn't happen that often. But from time to time, I'll see something that is a way of doing a technique, maybe in a certain circumstance, that actually works better than the kind of textbook way. And so I'll be able to see that and kind of explore it and look at it like, where could this work? How could this actually make more sense in some ways, in some situations? So this is the product of what we call a beginner's mind. And a beginner's mind is, it is always kind of like looking for or looking at things like it's the first time that we've seen them. And this is like a way of going through life with awe and excitement. Like anything could be new and anything could happen at any moment. So if you watch an infant or a toddler move around and interact with the world, things are exciting and new, and they're learning so much. They are like a sponge just ready to soak up anything, or like an empty cup. And it is that attitude that leads them to learn so much so quickly, coupled with the fact that they don't know anything. And so everything that they interact with is something for them to learn. But you can imagine you have a really messed up kid, a toddler with a terrible attitude that doesn't have a beginner's mind. They don't know anything, but they think they do know everything. And so therefore, everything they interact with, they're just like, nah, I already know about that. I'm bored by that. That toddler is going to suck. They're not going to learn anything. They're going to be terrible, forever, for the rest of their life. Now, as adults, we're not that different from that crappy toddler, because we still kind of think that we know everything. It just so happens that we know a little bit more. But if you look at, on the grand scale of things, what we know compared to what a toddler knows, or what a toddler knows compared to what we know, compared to what is actually the entirety of possible knowledge and experience and understanding, we are real close to the toddler. The toddler's here, we're here, and the rest of it is like, a rocket shot away. So we really want to put ourselves in that beginner's mind and be like an infant that has everything to learn and is really excited and looking for it. Now, that kind of explains less the active mindset of going out and searching for, looking for people to learn from, and more of like the passive mindset. So in emptying your cup, you kind of see both of these, where I'm actively emptying out my cup and then I set it down, and then that empty cup is like a sponge that is ready and waiting. So this is more of a passive way of being that invites in all kinds of knowledge and experiences things in a very different way. There's a great story that illuminates this, and this is another story from, I didn't just have this book out here for no reason. I'm going to read a story from it. So this is called No Water, No Moon. I flipped right to it. I've been meditating a lot, you can tell. So This is one of my favorite stories. When the nun Chiyono studied Zen under Buko of Engaku, my favorite part of reading these stories is butchering the names. She was unable to attain the fruits of meditation for a long time. At last, one moonlit night, she was carrying water in an old pail bound with bamboo. The bamboo broke, and the bottom fell out of the pail, and at that moment, Chiyono was set free. In commemoration, she wrote a poem. In this way and that, I tried to save the old pail, since the bamboo strip was weakening and about to break, until at last the bottom fell out. No more water in the pail. No more moon in the water. And this is kind of like an esoteric, kind of difficult to grasp story, but I like to think of this, obviously it is a very strong parallel to emptying your cup. This is like it happens by accident, and sometimes it will. You might have an experience, for example, when you're rolling with somebody or sparring with somebody, and they hit you with something good, or they tap you with something that kind of came out of nowhere, and you're like, oh, that's like when the bottom falls out of your pail and there's nothing in there, and the water and or the moon is kind of like the ego, and that is kind of like all this stuff that we're holding on to. You could also think of those very fragile bamboo strips that are holding the pail together as like the ego. This is all a very precarious situation. And at any point, it could just completely come crashing down and bust through. And now you're left with this empty kind of like, what just happened? And in that space, you can turn up the pail and look right through it. There's nothing there. There's actually nothing between you and the experience of this moment. There's nothing as like a wall that separates you from this moment or from this person or from this opportunity to learn. And I really love this as like a metaphor for enlightenment. So we're kind of walking around with this very fragile ego, and it's holding in this water and this moon, and as soon as it falls out, we're left with nothing. Nothingness is another way of saying everythingness. I don't think that's a word, but if you have nothing, if you really get to this state of complete like emptiness, what you really have is freedom. It is utter freedom. With that nothingness, with that emptiness, you can fill it with anything. And you can also just chill and be there with nothingness, which is beautiful. This is the kind of state that we want to get to in our meditation. You can't think your way through meditation. You can't keep adding stuff in the barrel and hope that it ends up well. What you need to do is just completely let it go. And this will be an experience that we have in our meditation sometimes, where you're sitting and you have that aha moment that's like, being smacked across the face, or like the bottom of the pail falling out, all the water falls out, and it's refreshing nothingness, emptiness. And that emptiness or nothingness is, for people who haven't really experienced it or don't really understand it, sounds like very depressing and very much like, I'm scared of that. I don't want nothingness. I don't want that. That sounds like death. That sounds like, what is the point of any of it? And that's exactly what it is. On some level, it is like death. And that's one of my favorite samurai sayings is die daily. Meditation is a daily practice of death. It is really connecting to that state of nothingness, where you stop to fear it. You start to recognize, like, wait a minute, this is actually okay. And instead of being like depressing, like nothing matters and what is the point of any of it. It can be more like, well, this is a great opportunity for me to then fill in with whatever meaning I want this moment or this life to have. And this is a very powerful practice for us to be able to choose the meaning. And you can't just pile it on top of the other stuff that's already there. You've got to get to that place of nothingness, that freedom, that ultimate freedom that comes from that meditative state of mushin and nothingness. So emptying your cup does not have to get quite that deep and go quite that far. It would be really nice if we could. I mean, if you could get into class, every single class, or enter any kind of conversation from that complete state of mushin where I'm just in an utter meditative state, ready for anything, then that would be really great. And practically speaking, that's kind of tough to do, but you can at least, in that moment, just say, I got to empty my cup. I've got to let go of this thought or this train of thoughts that sounds like I already know this stuff. And if we can do that, then at least in this moment, we can learn. At least in this moment, we can be ready to accept whatever there is to accept and experience. So, when we sit for a meditation now, this is what we're going to try to do. It would be really nice to get into nothingness completely, to get into mushin. And if you don't make it there, at least recognize when you have that thought. On some level, meditation is training our minds to be able to let go. And it's sometimes something we have to continue going back to. Let go, let go, let go. You have a thought, maybe you label it as thought, and don't hold on to it, let it go. That's it. You have a thought, and instead of holding on to it, you go back to the breath. And then you don't hold on to that breath either. You let that breath go. So this is the active letting go of, emptying of your cup, being ready for this moment, whatever it brings. Sit comfortably.